I built my parents a lake house for their 40th anniversary. 1 floor wide doorways, a path to the dock so my dad could walk to the water on his own again. 6 months later, I pulled into the driveway and saw my dad standing on the porch with his hands shaking while a man with a clipboard photographed the house. My dad did not know who he was. He did not know what was happening in his own backyard. My name is Megan. I am an accountant. I work with numbers all day. I notice the small things, decimals other people miss. Patterns that look like coincidences until you stack them up. I think I became the person I am because of the way my dad raised me. He taught me that the small things were never small. He told me once when I was a girl that anyone can do the big stuff if they have to. The hard part is paying attention to the things nobody is going to thank you for. I am the older child. My brother Ethan is younger. He moved out of state years ago for work and never really came back. He called on holidays. He sent cards on birthdays sometimes. We loved each other, but we were not in each other's lives. The kind of relationship where you do not know which knee is the bad one this week. I knew those things. He did not. That is not bitterness. That is the truth before the rest of the story makes sense. I need to tell you about my dad. His name is Tom. He is a man who never asked for help in his life. He would rather struggle with something for an hour than admit he could not do it. He worked construction for 40 years. His hands built things. His back carried things. Then his body started giving out the way bodies do when they have given everything they had. His knees went first. Then he had a small cardiac event a couple of years ago. And after that, his heart was never quite the same. He stopped being able to climb the stairs in the house where I grew up. He stopped being able to drive long distances. He never complained. He just got quieter. One Saturday I was visiting my parents and I watched my dad pick up his coffee cup with both hands. Not because the cup was heavy, because his hands were shaking and he was trying to hide it. He saw me notice. He looked away. We both pretended I had not seen anything. I went home that night and I ordered a different kind of cup. Wider, heavier on the bottom, easier to grip without slipping. I did not say anything when I gave it to him. I just put it on the kitchen counter the next time I visited. He saw it. He picked it up with one hand. He looked at me. He did not say thank you. He did not need to. We had always done things this way. He noticed. I noticed back. Nobody made a speech. My mom, Linda, is the person nobody sees in this story until you really look. She had been taking care of my dad quietly for years. The medications, the doctor appointments, the cooking, the driving. Nobody thanked her either, not even me if I am being honest. There was a day I came over and I found my mom in the kitchen with her hands on the counter and her eyes closed. She was not crying. She was just standing there. The way you stand when you have nothing left and you are using the counter to hold yourself up. When she noticed me, she straightened up and said she was just resting her back. I knew she was not. That was the day I started thinking about the house. I had been saving money for years without a real plan for it. After I saw my mom in the kitchen, I knew what the something was. I worked overtime for almost 2 years. I do not regret a single hour of it, but I will not pretend it was easy. There were nights I sat at my kitchen table with spreadsheets open and the numbers blurred and I just wanted to sleep. I kept going because every dollar I saved was a doorway my dad might be able to walk through one day without help. I found a piece of land in northern Michigan, small lake, quiet town. At night all you heard was water. I bought the land. I hired a contractor. I sat down with him and I told him exactly what I needed. I told him the doorways had to be wider than standard. Wide enough that a wheelchair could fit through if my dad ever needed one. I said the word wheelchair out loud and my voice caught on it. I do not know why. Maybe because saying it made it real. The contractor did not say anything. He just wrote it down. Kept going. I told him no steps anywhere. Not at the entrance. Not between rooms. The bathroom needed grab bars and a bench in the shower. I wanted soft flooring. Nothing slippery in case he ever lost his footing. The kitchen counters had to be at a height my mom could work at without bending. The path to the dock had to be smooth and flat and gradual enough that he could walk it on his own. That was the part that mattered to me most, the dock. My dad had spent his whole life on the water as a young man. His own dad had been a fisherman. Tom grew up on docks. He had not been able to walk to one in years because every place we knew had stairs or steep paths or rocky shores. I wanted him to be able to walk to a dock again on his own with nobody holding his elbow. There is a memory I keep coming back to from when I was a kid. My dad had taken me out on a little boat and helped me hold a fishing rod for the first time. Caught something small. I remember how scared I was that I would do it wrong. My dad did not reach over and reel it in for me. He just sat next to me and said, "You can do this. You see, you are doing it right now." I think every choice I made about that house came from that one sentence. I wanted my dad to feel the way I felt that day. Like the person next to him believed he could still do things. The contractor finished the house in early spring. I had not told my parents. I wanted it to be a surprise for their 40th anniversary. I drove them up to the lake on a Saturday. They thought we were going for lunch. We pulled into the driveway and my dad looked at the house and then he looked at me. He did not say anything. He got out of the car. He walked up to the front door. He pushed it open. He stepped inside. He looked at the wide doorways and the flat floors and the kitchen with the lower counters and the bathroom with the grab bars. He turned around in the middle of the living room and he looked at me. His eyes were wet. He still did not say anything. He walked through the back door. He walked across the porch. He walked down the path to the dock, slow, steady on his own. He reached the end of the dock and stood there looking at the water for a long time. I stayed back on the porch. This was his moment, not mine. My mom came out and put her hand on my arm. She said, "You built this for him." I said, "I built it for both of you." He came back up the path. He reached for my hand and squeezed it. He could not get the words out, he did not need to. They moved in 2 weeks later. The next 6 months were good in a way I had not seen in years. My dad drank his coffee on the porch every morning in the wide cup. He walked to the dock most days. Some mornings he made it all the way to the end. Some mornings only halfway. But he was walking. He was deciding he was a man with a place to go in the morning. My mom started smiling again. Small smiles, the kind you smile when you are not exhausted. She put a small herb garden by the kitchen window. She sat with my dad in the evenings and they watched the light change on the water. The porch light came on every night at sunset. My dad had wired it himself slowly over the course of an afternoon. It was the first thing he had built in years, 6 months. That was how long the quiet lasted before everything started. I was in town one Saturday picking up groceries when my dad called me. His voice was strange. He said, "Megan, your brother is here." I said, "What do you mean here?" He said, "At the house. He just showed up." With a suitcase I drove out to the lake. Pulled into the driveway. There was a rental car parked next to my dad's truck. I walked up to the porch. The door was open. I could hear my brother's voice inside. Friendly, easy. The voice he uses when he wants something but has not gotten to the asking part yet. I stepped inside. Ethan was standing in the living room with his suitcase by his feet. He said, "Hey sis." Came home. I looked at my dad in the chair behind him. I looked at the wide doorways and the flat floors and the cup on the counter and everything I had built for the man I loved most in the world. I knew Ethan had not come for no reason. I just did not know what he wanted yet. Next day we were on the porch in the evening. My dad was watching the light move across the water. Ethan was next to him with a glass of iced tea. He said almost to himself, "Dad, do you really walk down to the dock by yourself in the morning?" My dad said, "Yes." Ethan said, "Is that safe?" He said it the way you ask if a child should cross a busy street alone. My dad did not answer. He just looked at the water. The next morning my dad did not walk to the dock. He sat on the porch with his coffee in his wide cup. He looked toward the water, but he did not get up. The day after that was the same. I watched my dad give up the only thing he had taken back in the last 6 months. And he gave it up because his son had asked one quiet question. Few days later something else happened. My dad had started walking to the dock again slowly. Ethan saw him put his shoes on one day and said, "Let me come with you." He said it warmly. The way you say it when you mean to be helpful. My dad did not know how to say no. Ethan held his elbow the whole way. By the time they reached the bench, my dad was not walking on his own. He was being escorted. He sat down and his face was different. It was the face of a man whose dock had stopped being his. He did not walk to the dock alone again after that. Not while Ethan was in the house. Then I started watching him more closely. It was something small that did it. One afternoon, his laptop was open on the kitchen table. He was outside on a phone call. I was not trying to look. The screen was on his email. The top message had a subject line that said, "Final notice" in red letters. I could see one line of the preview. Outstanding balance. Closed the laptop. I did not say anything to anyone. But I understood something I had not understood before. Ethan had not come home because he had grown up. He had come home because he had run out of options. After that, I started paying attention to his words the way I pay attention to numbers at work. The same phrases kept coming up. Is it safe? Is that responsible? Do you feel like you have a say? They were not random questions. They were a pattern. He was not making conversation. He was building something. And once I saw the pattern, I could not unsee it. The third week, Ethan brought a folder to the dinner table. He set it down between the bread basket and the salt. He said he had been doing some research. Just out of curiosity. He said there were some really nice assisted living places not far from where he lived, just as an option. He said he had also pulled some numbers on what places like that cost. My dad reached out and picked up the folder. He looked at it for 2 seconds. Then he stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen drawer where my mom kept the takeout menus. He put the folder inside. He closed the drawer. His hand was shaking. I do not think anyone else saw that part. I had been watching his hands my whole life. He sat back down. Nobody said anything for the rest of the meal. But the folder was not the only thing. That night, my dad came out to the porch where I was sitting. He had a folded piece of paper in his hand. He held it out without saying anything. I unfolded it. It was a power of attorney form. The agent line had Ethan's name typed in. The principal line had my dad's. The signature line was empty. I asked him very quietly where he got it. He said Ethan had handed it to him this afternoon when nobody else was in the room. He said Ethan had told him it was just a precaution in case something happened. He said Ethan had a pen ready in his other hand. I asked if he had signed it. He said no. He said when Ethan handed it to him, Ethan had been watching his face the way you look at someone to see if they are tired enough or confused enough to do what you want. He had walked out of the room and carried the paper in his pocket for hours, not knowing what to do with it. I sat there with the paper in my hand, and every piece of the last 2 weeks rearranged itself in my head. The doc question, the folder at dinner, the laptop, this. It was not concern. It was a sequence. I told him he had done the right thing. He looked at me and his eyes were tired in a way I had not seen them before. He said, "Megan, my own son tried to get me to sign something while watching my face like I was already gone." I said, "I know, Dad." The next morning, a man I had never seen before walked into the backyard. I was inside making coffee. I heard my dad's voice from the porch. He said, "Excuse me, can I help you?" There was a man with a clipboard and a camera taking pictures of the house, the front, the back, the dock. My dad walked to the edge of the porch. He said, "Sir, what are you doing here?" The man smiled. He said he was here for the appraisal. My dad said, "What appraisal?" Came out. My dad turned and looked at me like a man who had just found out something was happening in his own house. And he was the last person to know about it. I asked the man who hired him. It was Ethan. 2 days earlier, he had not asked any of us. I told the appraiser to leave. He packed up and walked back to his car. I went inside. Ethan was in the kitchen. I asked him why there was a man taking pictures of Dad's house. He said we needed to know what the place was worth. He said it was responsible. I said, You do not call an appraiser unless you're thinking about selling. He said, nobody's talking about selling. Then he said, but look around. This place is too big for two old people. The dock is dangerous. It would be more responsible to find them something smaller. Closer to family, closer to him. He meant closer to him. I said, this house is the only place Dad can walk through doorways without help. The only place he can shower without being afraid. The only place he can walk to a dock under his own power. You do not know any of that because you were not here when I was building it. He did not answer that for a moment. Then he looked up, and the brother I had grown up with came out from behind the brother who had been pretending all week. He said, you know what this is really about. You spent 2 years quietly making yourself the only person who matters in this family. You built a house and you decide who walks where in it. He said, I am their son too. Where is my name? It is not on the deed. It is not on the bank accounts. It is not on anything. I said, your name is not on anything because you were not here. When I was crying in a contractor's office over the word wheelchair, you were not on a phone with me. When I was watching Mom hold herself up against the kitchen counter, you were in another state. You do not get to spend 10 years away and walk in for 3 weeks and demand a name on the deed. He said, I needed help. His voice cracked on the word. I did not soften. I said, I am sorry you needed help, but you did not come home to ask. You came home to take. I pulled the folded paper out of my pocket, the power of attorney. Held it up. I said, this is what taking looks like. The color went out of his face. My dad came in from the porch slowly. He had been listening. He looked at Ethan. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at Ethan again. He said, I may be sick, but I am not deaf. He said, I am tired of people standing in my own house talking about my life like I am not in the room. He said it quietly. He did not raise his voice. My dad has never raised his voice in his life. But that sentence had more weight than anything I had ever heard him say. Ethan looked at him. He started to say something. Then he stopped. He set his glass of water down on the counter hard enough that some of it spilled. He walked past me to the front room. He picked up his suitcase. He walked back through the kitchen and to the front door. He stopped at the door. He turned around and looked at me. The soft, helpful brother from the first week was gone. He said, this is not over. He walked out. The door closed behind him. The porch light was on. My dad was still standing in the kitchen with his hand resting on the counter for balance. My mom was in the doorway behind him with her hand over her mouth. Nobody moved for a long time. Ethan left, but the damage stayed. My dad did not walk to the dock the day Ethan drove away. He did not walk to it the next day either. He sat on the porch with his coffee in his wide cup and looked at the water from a distance like it belonged to someone else now. I came over every morning that week. I made breakfast. I sat with my mom. I watched my dad not walk to the dock. I did not push him. The whole point of the house had been that he could decide for himself. If I started telling him to walk, I would prove Ethan right. On the 4th morning, my dad turned to me and asked the question I had been waiting for. He said, Megan, am I a project to you? Are you taking care of me or are you managing me? He did not say it cruelly. He said it the way you ask a question you are afraid of the answer to. I sat down across from him. Took a breath. I said, Dad, I built you a house with wide doorways because I wanted you to walk through them on your own. I built you a path to the dock because I wanted you to walk to the water on your own. If I were trying to manage you, I would have built railings everywhere. I would have put a chair on the dock so you would never have to stand. I would have hired a nurse. I did none of those things because I was not trying to take care of you. I was trying to make a place where you could still take care of yourself. He looked at me for a long time. Something in his face softened. He looked at me like he believed me again. He sat there with his coffee for a while longer. Then he set the cup down and stood up slowly. He went into the bedroom. He came back out wearing his shoes. He looked at me on his way past the kitchen. He did not say where he was going. He did not have to. I followed him to the porch and stopped at the door. He kept going. He walked across the porch and down the path toward the dock. Slow, careful. I watched him from the porch and did not move. This was not my walk to take. He made it to the end of the dock. He sat down on the bench I had put there for him. His hands were shaking a little, but he was holding his cup with one of them, the same wide cup. He took a sip. He turned his face toward the sun. I watched him from the porch and my eyes filled up, but I did not cry. Not yet. This moment was his. My mom came up beside me. She put her hand on my arm the same way she had the day we first moved in. After a minute she said, "Your dad went to the dock today." I said, "I know." She said, "Because of you." I said, "No, Mom. He went because of him. I just made the door wide enough." She smiled. It was a small smile, the first real one I had seen on her face since Ethan arrived. The next few days were quiet. My dad walked to the dock every morning. He did not need anyone to watch him do it. He just needed to be the one who decided to go. Ethan called me about 3 weeks later. I almost did not answer. He did not say much at first. Then he said, "Hey." I said, "Hey." He said, "How is Dad?" I said, "He is walking to the dock again." He was quiet. Then he said, "Good. Just good." There was something underneath the word that had not been there in the kitchen the day he left. Not quite an apology, but leaning in that direction. He said, "I should not have called the appraiser." I said, "No, you should not have." He said, "I told myself I was being responsible." I said, "I know what you told yourself." He did not argue. Before he hung up he said, "Tell Dad." I said, "Hi." I said, "Okay." I did not promise to paw. That night I sat in my own house alone. I had not really stopped moving since Ethan arrived 3 weeks earlier. And I think my body had been holding something the whole time. Made tea. I sat at my kitchen table. I thought about my dad at the end of the dock. I thought about my mom on the porch. I thought about the question my dad had asked me about whether I was managing him, and I cried for about 10 minutes. It was not loud crying. It was the kind that comes when you have been carrying something for too long and finally get to put it down. When it stopped, I washed my face and went to bed. The next morning I drove to the grocery store and I bought the cheese my mom liked and the bread my dad liked and a thermos of fresh coffee. I drove out to the lake. I did not call ahead. I just showed up. That is how my dad and I had always done things. A few days later my dad gave me a note. He handed it to me without saying anything. His handwriting was harder to read than it used to be. The letters wobbled in places. I had to look at it twice to make sure I understood. The note said, "You did not control me. You saw me." I read it 3 times. Folded it. I put it in my wallet. It is still there. The porch light came on every night again. There had been one night during Ethan's visit when my dad had not turned it on. I had not said anything about it then. Had noticed. The night after Ethan left, my dad walked to the porch at sunset and turned the light back on himself. Has been on every night since. About a month later, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. It was an attorney in town, an older man. He said he had grown up with my dad. He said my dad had come into his office a few weeks earlier and had asked him to draw up a new will. He said he had assumed I knew. He was calling because the paperwork was ready to be signed and he wanted to make sure my dad had arrived to the office. I sat down on my couch. My dad had not told me anything. He had quietly arranged the whole thing himself the way he used to fix the roof of our old house when nobody was looking. Finishing the job before anyone could offer to take over. I drove out to the lake that afternoon. I did not bring it up. I made coffee. I sat with my dad on the porch. After a while he looked at me and said, "The attorney called you, didn't he?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Good." He said, "The house goes to you." He said it without anger. The way a man says something he has thought about for a long time and has finished thinking about. I started to say, "Dad, you do not have to do that." He held up his hand, just a small lift of his fingers. He said, I am not doing this out of anger. I am not doing it to punish anyone. I am doing it because for a long time other people have been making choices about my life and I am the one who lives it. He said, I made this choice myself. It is the first one in a while that nobody else helped me make. I did not say anything for a while. My eyes were wet. He reached out and put his hand on top of mine. He said, You built me a house, Megan. You did not build it for a deed. You built it because you saw me. And I am writing this down on paper because I know who actually saw me. I cried then quietly. For about a minute he let me. He did not try to fix it. He just kept his hand on mine. That same evening, my mom and I were standing on the porch watching my dad at the dock. She said something I will not forget. She said, Your brother got everything when he was little because he made noise. You never made noise, so we stopped looking. She said, I have spent the last 2 weeks thinking about every birthday and every dinner and every car ride where I did not really see you because you seemed fine. She said, You were not fine. You were quiet. There is a difference, and I should have known it. I told her she did not have to say all of that. She said, Yes, I do. The children who do not ask for things are usually the ones who already learn not to. We stood there for a while watching my dad at the end of the dock. Neither of us said anything else. I came over one evening with grocery bags, cheese for my mom, bread for my dad, a thermos of coffee. The three of us sat on the porch. The sun was going down behind the trees. The water was still. A heron landed at the edge of the dock and stood there with its long legs in the shallow water. My dad pointed at it. He said, Look, one word, that was all. We all watched the heron together. Nobody spoke for a long time. The kind of quiet that does not need filling. I built my dad a house. But what I gave him was not walls and a roof. I gave him the chance to feel like a man who still had a say in his own life. And every time he walks to that dock, slow, shaky, but on his own 2 feet, I get to watch the man who taught me everything become himself again. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. I love seeing where everyone is from. If this stayed with you, subscribe.